Welcome to the Practicing Drummer podcast. In this episode, I've got a conversation I had with Hank Allen-Barfield that was recorded in February of 2025. Hank's a young drummer living in New York City who recently graduated from Juilliard and is already staying really busy. I don't remember exactly how I first became aware of him, but it was probably on a live stream from Smalls or Mesro, and I've been following him ever since. In college, Hank studied with people like Kenny Washington, Billy Drummond, and Joe Farnsworth, but we spent a lot of time talking about Tim Metz, who was his teacher back home in Northern California, where Tim still plays, teaches, and has an online school. Quick personal note here, I think it was the same day as the interview with Hank that I reached out to Tim myself about some hang-ups in my own playing that have been bugging me. We jumped on a quick Zoom, and after just 30 minutes, I got some great advice that's already helping me. I have a feeling he'll be listening to this interview, so I just want to say thank you. I had a lot of fun talking to Hank, and I'm already looking forward to catching up with him in the future. If you're hearing this episode in early 2025, try to catch Hank in your town. He's out on tour with the singer Stella Cole throughout Europe and the US, and I think the last time I looked, they had over 30 dates on the calendar. As always, I'll put links to some of the things we talk about in the show notes and on the blog. And with that, let's get right into it with Hank Allen-Barfield. Hey Hank, how are you doing? Nice to see you.
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, I really appreciate you asking me to come on, man. It's an honor.
Oh.
The guests you've had, so it's nice to be on.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I've been a fan of yours on Instagram for a while, and I try to check out streaming shows that you do. I've watched some Smalls gigs. You played at Emmett's Place at least a couple times, it seems.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just one time with a bunch of different guests. But what I really like about checking out your playing is that I'm always inspired by something that you do, whether it's a comping phrase or drum fill or a way to set up a figure. And I've actually transcribed a few things and worked them into my own practice routine, which is a lot of fun. So, and it happens every time I watch your playing. I see something. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to try to comp that. So just want to thank you for that inspiration.
Well, that's the first time anybody said they've transcribed something of mine. So that's pretty cool. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So, I think what I want to touch on first before we kind of go back and I hear about your time growing up and learning how to play, I'm curious about the Emmett's Place experience.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come up where you got asked to do that? And then what's the setup for that? Are you getting a tune list in advance? Are you all rehearsing? Because some of the tunes had interesting arrangements and you were all pretty tight. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Emmett is, I've met him a number of years ago just through the New York City jazz scene. And as everybody meets each other here, and you develop relationships with these people. And he's been running that live stream out of his apartment since the pandemic, of course. And props to him. He really grew that into something so incredible for everybody involved, not just the ones who get to go and see it live and in person and play, but like everybody watching and stuff. So he's done an amazing job at cultivating sort of online scene that has managed to continue to grow and succeed post pandemic, which is something really beautiful. But he just does that out of his apartment up in Harlem. And he actually lives really close to where I live.
Oh, cool.
I'm also up in Harlem. And a couple of times in the last number of years, he's just asked me to come by. It's on Monday nights once a month. And I've gone by just to watch you. It's a 5-floor walk up, which is no fun, but you do it. It's a super tiny apartment. It's funny. The cameras actually make it look like not so small, but it's very cramped in there. Not in a bad way or anything, but you get very comfortable with everybody around you. And I think the first one I went to, Kurt Rosenwinkel was the guest, and I didn't go expecting to play or sit in, just went to see. And towards the end of the show, he asked me to sit in, which was very sweet of him because before that we hadn't really played together all that much. So kind of felt like almost like a test. So I sat in. We played Nika's Dream, which was pretty crazy because there's a video of Kurt playing Nika's Dream from like 10 or 15 years ago on YouTube that I used to watch all the time in high school. And that was kind of a crazy moment to be on Emmett's playing Nika's Dream with Kurt Rosenwinkel. Then it ended up getting posted on YouTube, which is, it was just all kind of a trip. but that was amazing. And then I've visited to sit in a number of times, and then I've only actually done the live stream gig one time, and that was a couple months ago with Vuyo and Stella,
Oh, yes, yes.
and that was a lot of fun. And yeah, as far as rehearsal, no, there's no rehearsal. We showed up about like an hour before we started streaming, and we ran through a couple of tunes that Vuya wanted to do and a few tunes that Stella wanted to do. There's like a general idea of a set list before we all showed up, but yeah, it's pretty thrown together, but not in an unorganized sort of way. Just in I don't know, just we just kind of roll with whatever happens kind of way.
Cool. Well, you sounded great. And I rewatched the Vuyo performance. I think the song was Love Walked In.
Mm-hmm.
Man, blisteringly fast tempo. I think I got my metronome out, and I think I clocked it at over 400 BPM at some points. And you were playing brushes, and you were hanging on the ride cymbal too, which was wild.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I remember right after we finished that tune, I think Stella was sitting on the couch behind me, and I looked at her and I was like, that was too fast. But all good. We got through it, so it was good.
So let's talk. I'll get back to some of the other gig stuff I want to talk to you about. I want to hear about how you put bands together for your small sets and set lists and all that stuff. But let's just get going. I know that you grew up in California, around the Sacramento area.
Mm-hmm.
Saw on your website that you started playing when you were 10. So can you tell me a little bit about what got you into the drums and kind of that early time and how you got into playing jazz music?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, the first thing that that has to be said, my father is a musician, a professional musician, an amazing songwriter and singer. He had a record deal in the 90s with Sony Epic, and
Oh, cool.
he was part of this band. He started this band. They're called His Boy Elroy, and they're like pop rock dance music, super 90s, but really, really good, catchy songs. And you still find it out there. He ended up meeting my mom at some point, and they moved from Hollywood, where he was doing the music thing, to up to Northern California. And they started a family with me and my brother. I have a little brother who's about a year younger than me.
Okay.
And that was that. But I grew up in a house where he was constantly playing guitar and piano and playing music, which seems like the most common musician story. It's like, oh, well, I grew up and my dad was always playing music or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's true, man. I think that really made a huge difference. My first instrument was piano. I took piano lessons in second grade. I absolutely hated it.
Common story.
Yeah, I hated it, but my dad always likes to say that I was really good at it, and I can't really remember if I was or not, or if that's just my dad being proud. But I would never practice, and I would just go into the lessons and like nail all the whatever we were supposed to be doing. And my teacher would be like, "Oh, it sounds really good. Like you must practice a lot." And I would always be like, my dad would always be like, "He didn't even sit down at the piano for 5 minutes this week." And I hated it. I hated doing the music thing. I was like, I'm never going to do this. And then a couple of years later, me and my brother really wanted to get the Rock Band video game.
Oh, yeah.
And I have this really distinct memory of being in Best Buy. We're checking out, and the guy's like, "Oh, Rock Band, nice." And my dad's like, "Yeah, I wish they'd play real instruments, but I guess this is fine." And I remember looking up my dad and be like, "I'm not going to play a real instrument. Like, I already tried that. I'm not going to do that." And so it's just this really funny thing. My dad never pushed me or my brother into really doing music professionally. In fact, he almost didn't want me to do it when I started getting serious about it in high school. But
interesting.
that was how I got into it. And then fifth grade, me and my buddies in elementary school, we wanted to start a rock band for the talent show. We were like, we'll be super cool if we play some AC/DC at the talent show. So,
and I did find on YouTube some videos of you doing Deftones drum covers. Was that around that time, or was that later when you were more of a teen?
That was about 2 years after I started playing. Yeah, I can't believe you found those, man. Those are so funny. And I always show my friends those, like, you guys won't believe what I still have up on YouTube. Those videos are actually, in my opinion, really impressive. I was 12. I swear I play those I was obsessed with the Deftones. I still am. Abe Cunningham was like one of my favorite drummers in the world at the time,
Oh, wow.
which is a really funny drummer to be really into as a 12-year-old. But I just was obsessed with him. He used to put these black marching heads, like the ones that are like, it's like carbon fiber. Like those heads are crazy. I'm not even sure what they are, onto normal drum shells. And he just got this crazy sound, and he's just an amazing rock drummer. And Deftones are from Sacramento, so I think I had like a little bit of a.
Oh, okay. Were you seeing them play when you were that age, or?
I saw them. Yeah, me and my dad went and saw them.
Oh, cool.
It was awesome, and I was just obsessed with Abe Cunningham. So yeah, I made those rock drum covers because that was right around the time too that YouTube was becoming sort of more popular. It
Mhm.
wasn't super popular up to that point, and you know, it's funny now. Everybody's a drum influencer because everybody has Instagram.
Right.
But at the time, if you were a YouTuber who made drum videos, there weren't very many of them, and I was like, well, I want to do that. That sounds fun.
Mhm.
So I tried to make those covers, and
Did you get a lot of attention on those videos? I didn't look at the counts or anything.
no, not really. I think one of them had like 1,500 views, and at
Okay.
the time I was like, "Yeah, I'm famous," but obviously it's nothing. But that was a lot of fun. That's kind of how I practiced at that age, was just learn a bunch of rock songs by ear, just over and over, just try and learn the parts exactly how they were. I think that really helped in a way. Looking back, it really helped to develop my ear, even though it was a completely different style of music.
So how did you transition into jazz music or improvisational music? Your story reminds me a lot of mine in a way, starting around that same age, but being way into rock and metal and sort of almost learning parts, and then for me, the shift into playing improvised music was a little challenging and still is sometimes, because I tend to still think like that, where I want a part, and to improvise on intricate tunes is sometimes tricky. So and we can get back to that, but I'm curious how you got into improvised music.
Well, I think this is a really interesting part of, I'm sure this happened to a lot. Like, I think a lot of people start maybe playing rock music or more straight ahead music and then getting into jazz. And I was very fortunate. I came through a public music program. Like, the public music program in my middle school and my high school was incredible. Folsom High School. The teacher there, his name's Curtis Gazer. Got to give a shout out. He's been able to cultivate this incredible program. Like, the jazz big bands in the middle school and the high school are some of the best in the nation for high schools. And it's so weird because it's just a public school. It's not an art school or anything. And that's just a testament to how much they care about music and their schools over there, which is amazing. And yeah, I was in 7th grade. I was in the concert band playing trumpet, and the middle school band director needed a drummer for the 8th grade jazz band. And all my friends in the class knew I played drums, and they were like, well, Hank plays drums, like, you should try out. And I was like, guys, I'm not playing jazz. Like, that is the worst type of music. There's no way I'm gonna go play jazz music. I just never listened to it. I didn't know what it was or anything. I was just like, discounted it, like, oh, it must be like elevator music or something. But I was like, whatever, I'll try out for it. I tried out. He was like, play me a beat. I played John Bonham's Fool in the Rain beat, which is really just a pretty shuffle.
Yeah.
And he was like, cool, you're in. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you'll be in the jazz band next year. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Nice.
I was so like not that excited about it because I think my bar was just so low for jazz music. I was a rock drummer, that was my goal. I was like, I'm gonna be a famous rock drummer.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing, man. Like, when I started, even at that age, after the first day of rehearsal with the middle school jazz band, it was over. Like, I was so obsessed with it. I was like, wow, this is so, like, actually playing with a live band. Like, there's me and 15 other people, and we're all playing this song. And it might not sound that good because we're all like 14.
Sure.
But this is crazy. I'd never experienced anything like that. Up to that point, the most people I'd played with live was like 4 of my friends in our garage. And that was just such a weird feeling, amazing feeling. And yeah, I got really obsessed, and I went up through the high school program. My sophomore year, I made the top band in the high school, and I started studying with this really, really great drummer, Tim Metz, who is very, very well known online and in person, and he's like the guy in Northern California. And another huge shout out to Tim. Without Tim, I wouldn't have figured anything out for real.
And was he your first teacher?
He wasn't my first teacher. My first teacher was, maybe some random dude in a. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I just don't remember his name. Like a random guy in like a drum studio.
Okay, okay.
And then I had one of the high schoolers teach me when I was in middle school. But Tim was my first real teacher.
And can you give me an idea of what you worked on with him? Do you remember some of those lessons?
Yeah, absolutely. He showed me the rudiment ritual, the Alan Dawson thing,
Yes.
and started doing that every single day. And he turned me on to Max Roach and the Study in Brown. That was like the first record that I heard where drums sounded melodic, and I couldn't believe that. I was like, wow, this is a real instrument. It's I'd been hearing those jokes since I was 10, like the drummer just is the guy who hangs out with musicians or whatever. And I hear
Right.
Max, I'm like, wow, he's really like playing melodies is amazing. And Tim showed me all that. And I mean, Tim, I feel like I can attribute almost everything I'd learned in high school and even college to something Tim had showed me. And he's just an incredible teacher. Yeah, anybody who's in Northern California should seek him out and study with him.
Now, was it mostly learning from records, or were you working out of, I mean, I know you're doing the rudimental ritual, but there must have been other book work. But I'm curious kind of what the mix was like with playing with records and transcribing or learning by ear.
Well, I think the reason he's such a great teacher is because it was a lot of records, and it was also all of the classic jazz drumming books that everybody goes through at some point, like the Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer, the one with the blue cover, and Syncopation, and all the Wilcoxon solos, the 150, and also the swing solos, which is funny because every single teacher I've had post Tim works through all the same books. Like when I studied with Kenny Washington during my graduate degree at Juilliard. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But the first day, the first lesson, he's like, "Have you ever played Wilcoxon?" It's like, well, yeah, I did that when I was 13. Tim prepared me so much for everybody that came after and for my life and career in music. So
do you remember some more albums that really hit you that he introduced you to or that you discovered on your own back then? Like what were your big ones as a teenager?
I specifically with Tim, it was A Study in Brown, and it was Four and More with Tony Williams, which again, every drummer has, they remember where they were when they heard that for the first time. That was such a crazy thing. And then to learn he was like 17 or 18 or whatever when they recorded that was even more insane and inspiring.
Yes.
So I think those are the two that really stuck with me with Tim. I mean, he showed me hundreds of records, but those were super influential for me.
Sure. Do you remember anything back then? Because it sounded like piano came pretty naturally to you, and it sounded like drums did as well. But do you remember anything that you had to put a little bit of extra effort into, or you just kind of weren't as comfortable with?
Well, it's funny. The instruments, I mean, kind of my whole life, playing instruments have come pretty naturally to me, and I just think I just think that's because of my dad. And drums were always pretty easy, to be honest, when I was doing all the rock stuff. Like when I was talking about learning those Abe Cunningham parts, it wasn't that hard. It was just a matter of how long does it take me to learn a 4-minute song. But when I started playing jazz, that's when things got really real and really difficult. And that's, again, I keep talking about Tim, but like that's why Tim was such a good person to have in my life and as my teacher to show me where to go. Because jazz is so ridiculously deep and nuanced. And as a 15 or 16-year-old listening to Four and More or Max or something, how can you listen to that and say, oh, now I know exactly what to practice? Because what they're doing is there's so many layers. And yeah, playing jazz is when it got really difficult. But I think for me at that time period, I took that as like an amazing challenge, and I loved the music. I got so obsessed with listening, and all I wanted to do was sound like these people. So it was a challenge in a way that wasn't discouraging. It was very encouraging. and inspiring. I was like, jazz drums, it sounds like the hardest thing ever.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
couldn't believe how difficult it was. But yeah,
So did you, I'm curious here too, just so I don't forget this note I have written down. Were you working on brushes at that time too, or did that come later?
I was working on brushes in high school, just a little bit, not a whole lot, but I was. I remember my freshman year of high school. The senior drummer at the time in the high school, like the top guy, his name's Carson Messer. He still plays. He's in San Francisco now. I remember watching him play at Ballad, and I'd never seen anybody play brushes at all.
Mm,
And the big band, they were playing Skylark, and he was doing the thing with the circles or the
yes.
whatever. And I'd never seen anybody do that. I was like, I heard it on records, but I never actually seen physically what that looks like. And I went to Tim my next lesson. I'm like, I saw Carson play. He was doing all this weird stuff with his. I don't even know what he was doing. Like, you need to show me what that is. And Tim was like, okay, we'll get to that. But I became really kind of enthralled with the motion thing. It was like so
Yeah.
fluid and pretty.
Yes, yes.
And so yeah, I was working on it a little bit, but it wasn't until college that I really started to get the brush sound
And I
more
noticed that you
together.
play counterclockwise with
Mhm.
your left hand. Is that something that was natural for you, or did Kenny Washington force that upon you, or?
Yeah, it was not natural for me at all. I wouldn't say forced it upon me,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I definitely, I definitely switched to play counterclockwise when I started studying with him. I had always played clockwise, and that's what came natural to me. And then yeah, I noticed. I don't even think he showed me. I think I just noticed from a video or something that he played
Yeah.
counterclockwise. Or he almost plays up and down. It's almost not even like a circle motion with him. He goes right up and down or side to side, like in a kind of a direct line with the brush, like almost 100% pressure on the drum the
Yes, yeah,
entire
yeah.
time. You know, there isn't a whole lot of circular motion with him, which I thought was really interesting. But he still does go. It's still a little bit counterclockwise.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
so, yeah, that felt super weird at the time, but I did think for me it objectively sounded better than going clockwise. So that's why I started
Yeah, I
doing it.
agree. I switched too, when I was much older, but same thing. I saw Kenny Washington, and then I think during the pandemic or maybe just beforehand, I decided I was going to try to get the counterclockwise thing going. So I just picked some series on Netflix that had like, 6 seasons or something. And I was like, okay, whenever I watch this, I'm just doing left
Mhm.
hand counterclockwise, and finally got it to stick. And I do agree that I think it sounds better for me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really smart idea. I always tried doing that, practicing while watching other media. I could never really do it. Couldn't
Yeah, yeah.
focus.
For me, it's hard to do any. I don't know how to exactly say it, but like meaningful or musical practice. But anything that's just muscle memory. I even remember as a kid just watching sitcoms and working on double strokes to get the sort of snap with the
Yeah,
fingers going instead of just bouncing. So I've
yeah,
always kind of
absolutely.
done that. And it works for the muscle memory kind of stuff. So before we move on, because I want to get to your time at William Patterson and Juilliard, but during the time that you were studying with Tim, were you also starting to play with smaller combos and going beyond the big band?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked about this. I was going to try and figure out a way to mention this because I think it was a really important thing in high school. My sophomore year, I note my sophomore year as a very important time because it's when I made, like I said, the top band in high school, which is whatever, not a huge deal at this point. But what it did do was it solidified the fact that I wanted to move to New York and be a jazz drummer.
Hmm.
So I knew when I was 15 that I'm moving to New York, I'm figuring it out, and I'm gonna do this because that's when I was at the peak of I was so obsessed, and I was also finding some success in my local community.
Yeah.
And so I started going to jam sessions in Sacramento, and that's when I started playing in combos or smaller groups, whatever, and not the big band as much. I just started going to the local. There was two jam sessions in Sacramento at the time. On Tuesday nights, at this place called the Naked Lounge, and Thursday nights at this place called Shine Cafe. It was just two coffee shops. They were very low key. Tim told me about them, and they were ran by the saxophone player Levi Sayula. He's still out in Sacramento in the Bay Area,
Oh,
and
cool.
incredible musician. And that's where I met like all of the local Sacramento scene in jazz when I was 15, where I started to kind of expand my I started to realize that more people cared about this music than just the people in my high school,
Yeah, yeah.
which was like 20 people. So it wasn't that many people in my high school. I was like, wow, there's all these people from all these different high schools and all these adults who come to these coffee shops twice a week and play jazz. This is amazing. And yeah, that's where I started learning tunes and learning how song forms worked
Yeah, yeah.
and understanding the art of kind of figuring your way through a tune you don't know that well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just getting together a repertoire and kind of an etiquette of how jam sessions are supposed to be ran and how you play with people you don't know at all. Yeah, that was a really amazing time. That was another thing I became very obsessed with, was like I had to go to the jam sessions every week. And I was like the only one in my high school, maybe me and a couple of my buddies. We'd drive down to Sacramento, like 20-minute drive, just to maybe play one tune or two tunes. But that's how I got really integrated into the Sacramento scene. And by the time I left for William Patterson, just a few years later, I had been playing gigs and playing in the house bands at the sessions, and had really made a tiny bit of a name for myself as just kind of like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
young drummer or
Yeah.
whatever. And I think that was really good for me when I moved out east to have a little bit of experience.
Since we're already talking about the move, let's go there. So had you done any trips out to the East Coast, or you just went cold? And was William Patterson your school, your choice, or were you thinking about different options? And how did you land there?
Yeah, it totally wasn't my choice, to be honest. It was kind of at the bottom of my list, and I applied there
Hmm.
because Tim went there, and I knew that they had an amazing alumni and everything, and I knew it was a great school, but I really wanted to be in Manhattan, so I wasn't really thinking that I was going to go to William Patterson.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
and no, I had never been to the East Coast. I mean, I'd been to Florida, but that seems like a different like country or
Yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah.
So I'd never been to the Northeast, and so yeah, life happens, money happens, and I couldn't afford any of the New York schools, and I didn't get into Manhattan School of Music, and I didn't even apply to Juilliard because I was like, I'm not going to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into the new school, but not enough money, and I got into SUNY Purchase. But William Patterson was cool because the director there, David Dempsey, who just retired, amazingly, he had been there for like 40 years or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
He gave me like a personal call, which I think they still do to all their students. They admit it's like a really small program. It's only 50 or 60 students. And he gave me a call and was like, Hank, this is Dave Dempsey, just calling to let you know that we've accepted you into William Patterson. We would love you to come. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought I was like a number, or just
Sure,
a
sure.
whatever. And it felt like a family immediately upon, like before even flying out there. So that was the choice. It was also the most affordable, and it was where Tim went. So all great things. And yeah, we moved out there. I didn't know a single person, and just made some of my. I was so lucky. I just made some of my best friends in the world still to this day. In my first week of being there, it's really crazy.
So do you remember when you got there and started playing with people? Was it a big eye opener? Were there things that right away we were like, oh my gosh, I need to do X, Y, and Z? Or kind of what were your feelings around that? Because
Yeah,
I definitely remember that from when I went to Berkeley, and kind of being the
yeah,
good player in high school, and then I go to Berkeley, and it's
yeah.
a heavy scene.
Uh-huh, big time, man. I was warned a little bit beforehand because I was really in high school. I watched everybody's Grammy band tapes. I don't know why. I really wanted to see people my age playing Billy's Bounce or whatever, like how drummers were playing who are
Oh,
also
sure,
16 or
sure.
17. And for those who aren't familiar, the Grammy band, I don't know if it's still a thing. I think it maybe isn't a thing anymore, but it's like just a kind of an all-star band for any high schooler in the country, where people would, you'd make a 15-minute YouTube video of you playing five standards, and you'd post it on YouTube, and it'd be public, and you could just go and watch anybody's tape.
Yeah, and yours is
And
still on YouTube.
yeah, mine is still there. I should really take that down, but all good. So I was already aware that there were some really bad dudes who were my age who were going to be in New York, but nothing prepares you for being there in person. Like when I got there in the first week, we set up a little jam session, and like I said, I'd been playing the jams in Sacramento for years. I was
Hmm.
like, I'm cool. Like I'll be fine. And I walk in, and there are a couple grad students in there. Specifically, there's this drummer, Steven Kramer. He lives out in Brooklyn now.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he is a monster. Like, just one of the best drummers I've ever seen. And he was the first dude that I saw, which is man, what a tough guy to see first because he's so good. They walked in, they were just playing whatever, some standard, and it was immediate. Like, fuck, like I have so much to work on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's really scared me, but he's such a sweet dude and really nice. So it wasn't scared in that like intimidated way,
Sure,
but just
sure.
like, oh my gosh, like that's when I first noticed like there are serious levels. This is a peer of mine. Are you serious?
Mm.
Like this dude sounds insane. And everybody was like that there. Everybody was so good. And yeah, definitely a moment of oh man, I need to get some stuff together.
So, who were you studying with at William Patterson, and what kind of stuff did you start working on to up your game?
Yeah, I was studying with Bill Goodwin,
Okay.
he's just a veteran, man. He was in Phil Wood's band for basically Phil Wood's entire career, and I think that was kind of how his claim to fame. But he's really played with everybody under the sun throughout his career, and he was an incredible resource. He just had so many stories and so many nuggets of advice from his experience living in New York and being a drummer full time. And we did do a lot of stuff playing, but mostly our lessons, it was a lot of talking
Mm.
and more conceptual sort of things. You know, how to keep your head straight
Yeah.
while being in New York is kind of an intense thing for
Yeah,
a
sure.
teenager. And he was really important to my development. It was also at William Patterson though that I started studying with Joe Farnsworth outside of
Oh,
school
cool, cool.
because so Farns went to William Patterson. And so he would come by every once in a while to sub for different teachers, and I met him there. And I started going up to his place in the Bronx and taking private lessons with him and followed him to all his
Yeah,
gigs. I
yeah,
was like a
yeah.
puppy dog, and he was my favorite drummer, and I just wanted to be like him and play like him. And um, yeah, he was a huge kind of role model musically for me in college. So I studied with him a lot, and he's where I got a lot of my drum stuff together, in my opinion, through at William Patterson, just through. It's funny because he's not even a faculty there, just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
when I was at school.
So, what kind of stuff were you
Yeah.
working on with him that upped your technical game?
Yeah, he did like all pad practice because he lives in an apartment
Yeah,
in New York. It's not necessarily the most drum set
sure.
friendly place in the world. So he does a lot of pad practice. He has like unlimited exercises that he's learned from all these master drummers that were really sweet, and different comping exercises and stuff with just snare bass drum. That was a big one, just snare drum, bass drum independence comping while keeping the ride cymbal
Uh huh.
straight, like not varying the cymbal beat, just ding
Yeah,
ding
yeah,
ding 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 the whole time. And anytime I would like try and vary
yeah.
it, he'd be like, no, don't do that. Or he'd be like, all right, play blues but never hit the top of the chorus, and I'd play, and it was surprisingly impossible to like not
Oh,
want to
sure,
mark the
sure.
top. It's just just stuff like that. He'd have me play bird heads or Bud Powell heads on the snare drum with different stickings and stuff, and try and make the phrasing sound like you're a saxophone player, phrasing like you're a piano player. And that really helped with developing vocabulary on the drums. That was huge, actually, like starting to get drum vocabulary from non-drummers, I think was really interesting. I never thought about that. It's like any transcription I'd ever done was from a drummer. And instead, I started transcribing the phrasing of Barry Harris or something and working it out on the drum set or on the snare drum or into comping patterns. And I feel like that really elevated my understanding of jazz music, not just drums, but just like how the music works. And he was the one who showed me
Oh,
that.
nice. And
Farms.
were you also going out to check out other drummers in the city? You know, it's wild being in New York. On any night, you could go see a number of your heroes.
Yeah.
So, do you remember any of the really special gigs that you saw during that time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I saw so many people in that age group, like in Farnes's age and before, a lot of people my age, or I mean, saw a lot of people. Obviously, like you said, you can go see anybody any night, basically. The ones who stick out though are the big names. You know, the first time I saw
Yeah.
Roy Haynes, the first time I saw Lou Hayes and Jimmy Cobb. when they, before they pass. I mean, Hayes is still alive, but I saw them a number of times, and that was a real trip. Al Foster, a real trip because they play stuff, and my brain recognizes them as, oh man, that sounds like Al Foster, and it's like, oh shit, that is Al Foster. Like it's so weird hearing that stuff in person. Man, it's too bad. I mean, it would be really cool to be around in like the 80s or 90s because so many of our heroes were still alive and playing at a really high level, and it would have been really interesting to hear all those sounds in person.
And so, were you playing out a lot when you were at William Patterson as well, or pretty much just sticking to playing in school?
I wasn't really playing out at all until a few years into school. Yeah, I was just playing at school
Okay.
mostly with my buddies, just trying to practice as much as possible. I got my first real gig with Vincent Herring, a really
Oh, yes, I
amazing saxophone
saw
player.
him talk about that.
Yeah, he
He took you to Dubai, didn't he?
that's really funny. He sort of did. He got me a gig in Dubai that he ended up not going.
Oh, okay, okay.
But I still went with a band. That was really interesting. That was a while ago. That was with Samara Joy
Oh, wow,
before she
wow.
blew up and was really famous, and Jason Clotter on bass, and yeah, just like some of my buddies. Yeah, we went to Dubai. That was my first time out of the country. That was kind of a weird place to go for my first time, but
Sure, sure.
yeah, he gave me my first gigs. He used to run at this club uptown called Smoke Jazz
Oh,
Club,
yeah, yeah.
which anybody in New York knows about it. They recently renovated it and turned it into a sort of bigger, nicer, more upscale club. But before it was renovated, before the pandemic, it was a really tiny club, and they had jam sessions every single night, and it was a place for everybody to go hang out. And Vincent Herring ran the Monday night jam sessions, and he started calling me for those my junior year. I was 19. I was so not ready to do that,
Hmm.
but he saw something in me,
Yeah.
and I met him at William Patterson. He was one of my teachers at William Patterson, and yeah, he just saw something in me, and I mean, like having a mentor in New York, I think is so important. And Farnsworth was one, and Vincent Herring was one, and it's something that I feel like doesn't happen as often anymore, having a like bands form where there's like a older musician who's been around for a long time with younger musicians. Some people do it, but it doesn't seem as common as it was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s,
Yeah,
where there were
sure,
a lot
sure.
of bands with kind of a mentor and mentee sort of vibe, like Art Blakey, for example.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, Vince just put a lot of trust into me and started hiring me for these sessions at Smoke, and those are my first real gigs, and that was such an amazing learning experience. All of a sudden, I went from playing at school with my friends to playing with Vince and Yasushi Nakamura and Dave Kokoski and like all these just like the heaviest dudes in New York. And me being like on stage and on the bill with them was like, wow, this is this is insane. Like this is what I dreamed about. And I think I held my own for my age, and I think I did a good job on those gigs. But it's listening back, I was like, I was not ready. But that's the point. Nobody's ever ready.
Yeah, Vincent had such nice things to say about you during your senior recital at
Oh
William
yeah,
Patterson too. Again, another thing that's up on YouTube.
yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very
it
sweet.
was really beautiful to hear, how much he liked your playing, and I think what he said specifically was something along the lines of, there's a lot of playing jazz drums that can't be taught, and
Mm,
it's feel,
hmm.
and you've got it. And it was just it was really cool, 'cause you're still so young now, but you were even younger then, so it's
That's sweet that you saw that. Yeah, he's always been very supportive.
so let's talk about finishing up at William Patterson and then deciding to go to Juilliard. Was that an immediate thing, or did you go back home for a while and then hit Juilliard? How did that come up?
Yeah, I took a gap year, and I didn't think I was going to go to grad school, to be honest, because by the time I graduated William Patterson, I was working a lot in the city and I was making a living. And yeah, I was like, man, maybe I don't need the extra degree.
So
I
your
think I,
gap year was in New York?
My gap year was in New York.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
I never
okay.
went home. Yeah, I was working a lot, playing with a bunch of people, and yeah, making enough money to get by, and that was kind of all I wanted to ever do.
Nice.
So I was like, well, maybe I don't need to go to grad school, but it was like the night before the pre-screening was due, and I had the materials kind of put together, but I wasn't sure if I was going to actually apply or not. I was like, "Oh, might as well. Let's see. Let's see what happens." So I only applied to Juilliard. I just sent them my pre-screening and everything, and ended up working out. Like that was a very rigorous audition process, but I got through the whole thing and got like a decent enough scholarship. It wasn't full ride, not even close, but it was enough to get by. And
Yeah.
yeah, I decided to do it. I said like if I'm going to go to grad school, it's going to be there, and if it's not there, then I'm just going to work and be fine. And yeah, it worked out, man. I'm glad I went, but it was
Yeah,
hard.
who did you study with when you were there?
So I studied with Kenny for a year. I studied with Billy Drummond for a year. I know has been on the show.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and those are a really, those are a really funny duo of people. I also studied with this guy Paul Wells, who's
Oh yeah,
another really
yeah.
great New York drummer, who was really, really amazing teacher. I got a lot of stuff together with him, but
What did Paul have you working on?
we did a lot. It's funny. We did a lot of the same stuff, like the Wilcoxon, and
Okay.
we did transcriptions together. What I loved about Paul is that he's like the most professional of the professionals. He has everything together. Like I used to ask him like about drum writers, like what do I send to a performing arts center, like when they ask what gear I want. I was like, I
Oh,
don't know.
interesting.
I've never done that before. He's like, I got you.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And he got me hooked up with Peisty, which was I owe him so much for that. He put me in touch with the director of artist relations there,
Nice.
and he was just a massive help to me. But Kenny and Billy were hilarious because they're complete polar opposites.
Yeah, but they're good friends.
Yeah, they're great friends, and that was anytime they saw each other at school, they would it was just a hoot, man. They were just hilarious together, and they're just so opposite in a lot of ways, like the way they teach, the way they play, the way they, in my opinion, the way they think about music and life, even.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get too deep about it, but I was splitting lessons with them. Like one week I'd have Kenny, and the next I'd have Billy, and
Oh
I did that for
wow.
a year. And yeah, that was amazing, man. They're incredible.
Can you tell me a little bit about Billy Drummond's teaching style and what you worked on with him? And the reason I ask this, and I think anybody that's listened to the podcast knows Billy Drummond, is for reasons that I can't exactly pinpoint. He's one of my favorite drummers, and I'm just I'm jealous that you got to
Oh,
study with him. So
yeah,
tell me whatever you can about that.
absolutely. Yeah. I totally understand the reasons you can't describe. That's how I feel about Billy Higgins, where I don't even know
Yes.
why.
Yeah.
He's just my favorite ever
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
for many reasons, but for almost no reason. It's hard to put a name on it. But Billy Drummond, yeah, he well, it's fun. I listened to the podcast that you did with him when he was a guest, and the way I think you were describing his playing, you were like, I really like the way you play kind of from the bottom up, and
Mm.
uh,
Oh yeah, I forgot
blah blah
about
blah.
that. Yeah, right, right,
Yeah,
right.
and you were just you had all these really nice things to say, and it was a really accurate analysis. I was listening. I'm like, yeah, he does play like that. Yeah, absolutely. And his response was like, "Oh man, like I don't know, I've never even thought about that. Like, that's funny. I guess you're right, but I never even thought about how I did that. I mean, that's whatever." He's so humble, and that's
Yeah.
how he is as a teacher and as a person. Is He is such a giving teacher. Like anything you ask, he gives you as much of an answer as he can, which is usually a lot. But it's that none of it is ever like, well, you got to go listen to this to figure that out. It's always like he's so genuine with his giving of information. Like anything that he's learned, he wants to pass on. He's so humble, such a sweet person, and he'd probably listen to this and laugh and be like, "Ah, nah, man, blah, whatever." But it's really how he was as a teacher. It's like anything you asked him, he had very, very um, I don't know. It's hard to even describe. Like he just really cared a lot about giving as much as he could. Our lessons were fun. He had me working out of this snare drum solo book by Ron Tierno. It's called Melodic Snare Drum Solos, I think.
Okay.
It was really interesting, man. It was very different than like a Wilcoxon solo book, in the sense that this guy Ron Tierno, I think he's still around in New York, teaching. He wrote solos out that corresponded to songs. So I like me and Drummond worked on this one solo for most of the semester that corresponded with George Benson's Affirmation, like the entire song, the
Oh,
song
interesting.
and the solo. And it was like a snare drum solo that lined up with like the 6-minute song, and there was all these stickings and accents and this and that, but it's like you played along with the song, and so it's kind of a more organic, like sort of fun way to
Yeah.
think about snare drum soloing. And it makes so much sense when you think about how Billy plays. It's like, and also when we talk about how Wash and Billy are sort of different from each other, it makes sense that Billy was really into the kind of melodic, how can we take a snare drum thing and work on our hands and rudiments, but make it kind of more about music in a way.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard of that book. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's absolutely worth looking into. It's a cool book. But we did a lot of that. A lot of the times I would come in and he'd be practicing, and I would kind of sit down and just watch him play for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'd ask him about, maybe something he did or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I'd always ask him like how he gets the sound he gets, and like the one that, how you described it as kind of bottom up. I've never understood, man. It's so frustrating watching him play, and it sounds like Billy Drummond, and then me sit down and I'm like, well, this is like a completely different instrument that I'm on. That
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
nothing like that. He's just such a master at getting a sound out of the drums it's like very earthy.
Oh, yeah. His
And
touch is incredible.
yeah. And I used to talk to him a lot about orchestration. I think the way he orchestrates things is very interesting. We both play with this pianist, Jeb Patton,
Oh, right.
and it was always really fun. Like, I'd play a gig with Jeb and play all his arrangements and stuff, and I play them however I'm hearing it. And I'd go and hear Billy play with Jeb, and it's just a completely different everything, and it makes everything sound different.
Yeah.
In my opinion, much better. But I guess that's kind of up for interpretation on how you feel about how a drummer is supposed to orchestrate things. But I now go into the lesson and be like, man, I noticed you did this on this tune, and why or what. And yeah, just that was a lot of the lessons, trying to figure out how he thought about music.
Okay, so after you were done with Juilliard, and I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about there, but I kind of want to keep cooking along here. Once you were done with school, and you said you were gigging already while you were in school, do you remember some of the big lessons you learned on gigs where you were like, man, I really messed that up, or that went really well, or somebody gave you some feedback?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson that I learned, which is really obvious, but for whatever reason, in my opinion, it seems like a lot of people struggle figuring this one out, is I think just being a professional is like the most important thing that you can do for yourself. And what I mean by that is just like showing up on time. If they send you music before, just learn the music. Uh like, don't be a dick. Like, have a good attitude.
Mm-hmm.
If you accept a gig, like, you accepted that gig. So at that point, don't complain about the money, don't complain about the time, don't complain about the circumstances of the whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I just noticed a lot of people kind of maybe struggle with that a little bit, whatever, if it's ego or I don't know, man. But that was such a big thing when I just used to get the comment a lot. Someone would hire me for a gig. I'd show up, I'd be early, I'd learn the music that they sent me, and then they would say like, "Wow, it's so great you learned the music. Like, thanks for checking out the music." It's like, what do you mean? That's the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
point, like, you're hiring people and they're not checking the music out you send them. Why even send them music? And I think it's so interesting. I don't know why that is with people, but it's always like the number one piece of advice I tell anybody if they're like, "Well, what should I do to be successful in New York?" And not even that I'm super experienced and successful in New York. Obviously, I'm still a young guy, but
Yeah.
just be professional, be cool, learn the stuff that's sent to you, show up on time. Like, it's really not the most complicated thing ever. And people really struggle with that. So I'd say that is like the biggest lesson that I've learned through just playing as much as I've have been able to.
Yeah, well, I can say even I was surprised for how young you were, that you were right on top of all the communication we had. From the first Instagram message I sent you, you were getting right back to me. And then when we started emailing, I was worried because a lot of young people aren't cool with email, but you're right on top of that too. So whatever you're doing is working.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I was a little embarrassed that I couldn't figure this out, and I was about 5 minutes late to this recording.
Oh, no, it's all good.
'Cause
It always happens. It always
yeah,
happens. So.
but yeah, I think that's it's just such an important thing that people just tend to overlook because it's so obvious. And it's, man, the obvious things are the most important ones. Like there are so many good drummers in New York, so many good drummers, so many good musicians. What makes you stand out is are those things.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
being reliable.
So let's jump into kind of your current day-to-day life now as it relates to drumming. I'm curious, do you have a place where you can practice now?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I have some drums set up behind me that are fine. They're not super great,
Okay.
but and I try not to play them too much because I'm a little bit self-conscious of people getting angry at me, like my
Yeah,
neighbors and stuff.
I get
But
it.
I'd say pad practice is like the biggest thing.
Are you hitting it every day?
Yeah, I try and hit it every day. I mean, it doesn't always happen, to be honest, especially when I'm on the road. I
Yeah.
find it really difficult to just find the energy or focus to be able to sit down. But I think the way I look at it is, even if it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes on a practice pad, that is exponentially better and more helpful than just being like, oh, I'll just practice tomorrow or whatever. Like
Oh
just
yeah,
missing
for
it.
sure.
It's just all, even 5 minutes. It's all better than not touching a stick, or even not, like, you just maybe just actively listening is your practice for the day. You don't even have to play drums. It's just like doing something every day, even for a short amount of time, I think is better. And I think in New York, that's really what you have to do. I'm very fortunate that I work enough, so I play on enough drum sets a week that I
Yeah,
never feel like,
you can stay in shape. Yeah.
yeah, like I don't feel the need necessarily to always be behind the drum set to get some practice in. But obviously not everybody is working that much, and that's totally cool. And that's, it's just a kind of a struggle of living in New York, man. It's just kind of part of the grind, I guess.
Yeah, so you mentioned active listening as practice, which I think is really important. I'm curious if there's anything you're checking out lately, or, just over the last couple months, what kind of stuff you're checking out?
Yeah, absolutely. Lately it's been a lot of vocalists, and a lot of just seeing how different drummers accompany a vocalist and
Mm.
different ways you can do that. And also how piano players accompany vocalists. I've been getting more into that, even though it's not directly related to how I would necessarily play the drums. I think kind of being informed on what other instruments should be or are doing is very helpful. I'm really fortunate. I'm in a great band. I play with an amazing vocalist right now, Stella Cole, and the trio that, like, her band is me, Mikey Migliori on bass, and this piano player Michael Kanan, who is
Oh yeah,
a,
yeah.
yeah,
I
he
met
is.
him. I met him by chance at the Vanguard when I was seeing Bill Charlap, with
Oh,
Kenny Washington. I just happened to
hmm.
be sitting next to him, and I did not know who he was. And for some reason, he looked like a piano player to me. And I just turned to him and I said, "Are you a piano player?" He's like, "Excuse me." And then anyway, we had a nice little chat, and it was pretty funny.
Oh, that's awesome. He's the man. I'm actually going to see him after this call.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, man, he's amazing. He's a master accompanist, and it's been, I did not say that word right. All good. It's been so nice to play with him and to watch how he acts with a vocalist and how he supports a vocalist. And I think it's, even though it's a different instrument entirely, it's so applicable to how we play drums. So I've just been trying to listen to enough to a lot of vocalist albums, and kind of get deeper
Yeah, and
into
he does
that.
a lot of gigs without drummers, from what
Hmm.
I see at Mesro too, right?
Yep. He has a trio. Him, Neil Miner, Greg Ruggiero. They are insane. If you're ever in New York, anybody listening, and Michael Kanan's trio is playing at Mesro, go see them. That is the best show in town. About 10 out of 10 times. It's an amazing night. Yeah.
Nice. Since we're on drum stuff, you did mention your Peisty endorsement. I'm curious what ride cymbals you like.
Yeah. I'm obsessed with Peisty. I got obsessed with him when I became obsessed with Billy Higgins, specifically when he was playing with Cedar Walton, because he played all those 602s,
Mm-hmm.
all the Blue Label 602s or whatever, bunch of rivets and really bright. And I started buying them myself, searching Reverb every day or the forums for like any 602 I could get my hands on, and just got really obsessed with them. So I was playing specifically Pisces 602s for years. And then when Paul Wells introduced me to Tim Shahady and I had a chance to sign with them, I started playing all their Masters series, which I mean, a lot of drummers play those and are
Yeah.
familiar with them. And that's what I play pretty much exclusively now is all the Pisces Masters. And I have like a bunch of them. I just kind of rotate them through.
Are you into the ride? I know some guys are into the crash ride.
Yeah, I have a crash ride, a 20-inch crash ride that I like to play on my left.
Okay.
And that's the one I get the most comments on, is for whatever reason, it's like switching to that from the main ride. I usually play like a 22, whatever, medium, I don't know, dark. I'm so bad with gear. Dark ride, 22 dark ride on 22 with some rivets, or a 20 dark ride. That dark crash ride with no rivets on the left. Every time I play that, they're like, "Oh man, I like that cymbal. That sounds nice." And I think it's just because they all work really well together.
Yeah.
Yeah, dark ride is great. They also have a really nice one, 20-inch Bluebird mellow ride. It has like
Right.
a blue label.
Yes.
And I get like, I don't know, I've gotten a lot of compliments on those, and I think people really like the brightness feisty, even if they don't know. A lot of people play Zildjian and Istanbul or whatever, lots of very like kind of dark, mysterious, washy cymbals.
Uh-huh.
My only problem with those is they always sound amazing when you're in a practice room, and then when you play them on a gig, everything gets lost. Like you can't hear any stick definition. It just sounds like a big wash, especially if there's rivets involved. And there's just you can't feel any of it. And the thing with Peisty, in my experience, is that in the practice room, maybe a little sharp, it's kind of
Yeah.
they're pretty bright, at least the ones that I like. But when you play them in the gig, when there's people in the club and there's other music happening, the brightness kind of fades, but what stays is the stick definition and the clarity, which I think is so, so important. I think other musicians who aren't drummers really appreciate it. And they don't necessarily know why, but they're like, wow, that cymbal sounds really great. And it's just because they can actually hear what's happening.
What kind of sticks are you using?
I use MJC5s, the Vic Firth, the nylon ones. I use those, or if I feel like playing wood tips, I use the AJ ones.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
I switch between those depending on maybe what I listened to that day.
Yeah,
like if
sure.
I don't know, like the other day, as small as last week, I'd been listening to Tony all day with the VSOP band, where he's playing like big fat sticks and no rivets. So I took all the rivets out of my cymbals and played wood tips for the whole gig, and it was pretty fun, man. But if I'm listening to like Billy Higgins, that is, like, or Farnsworth or whatever, it's like all nylon. So I don't know, it just depends what kind of mood I'm in.
Yeah. Save some money playing nylon tips too.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, I switched to the SD11s.
Yeah.
Which is embarrassing, but it's solely because that's what Billy Drummond plays.
Yeah, I know. They're like the baseball
sound.
Bats.
Yeah, but I like the sound that he gets out of them on the cymbals and the drums. And it's interesting. They feel really good in the hands because they're big, and then it kind of forces you to play a little lighter and really focus on your touch.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now I want to shift back and talk about something we touched on earlier. You play at Smalls a bunch and you lead your own gigs. I'm really curious about, I sort of have an idea about how you pick your bands, it's right, friends, musicians you like, that sort of thing. But what I was really surprised with, especially with your most recent gig there a couple weeks ago, is the set list and the tunes. Because you're not picking the most well-known songs that everybody's just going to know, and the heads are a little bit more intricate. Just to name a couple of them, Duke Pearson's New Girl, which is a really cool tune. Arioso, the James Williams tune, and then I never feel like I'm pronouncing this Horace Silver tune correctly, but Acaro.
Yeah, Acaro, whatever.
Acaro, yeah. Yeah, so how do you go about picking your set list for that? And then again, are you guys prepping at all? Are these tunes that you know, or are these tunes you want to challenge yourself with?
Well, you kind of said it. It's just tunes I like, to be honest.
Yeah.
I wish there was a deeper answer. I do try and choose tunes that aren't played as often,
Okay, makes
but I
sense.
also try and stay away from like really obscure stuff because I think that's kind of annoying for the other musicians, like I never want everybody to be constantly reading on stage. So I try
Mm,
and find like an in between where like New Girl or Echo are tunes that people know, like they've heard them before, but they're not necessarily played all the time.
right, right.
And I think that's a kind of a nice in between, especially for a Smalls gig, which Smalls is an amazing club, and
Hmm.
it's such an honor to play there as much as I do. With that being said, it's sort of a more casual gig. It's not the most serious gig in the world. So I never want to do things that like really require a lot of rehearsal or work before the
Uh-huh.
gig starts. But yeah, I love Horace Silver tunes. I mean, obviously, I love Duke Pearson, Horace Silver. Arioso such a killing tune.
Yeah, it
Mikey, the bass
is.
player, showed me that, and that's one that I'd never heard before we played it together. And that's just such a nice tune. But yeah, I think that's really it, man. It's just music I like that isn't the most common stuff in the world. And for a number of years, I was leading my own groups around town at like the Django and obviously Smalls and Mesro. And when Cafe Bohemia was still open, it closed down a couple years ago. Unfortunately, it's opened and closed like a bajillion times. But I was doing Wednesday nights there and leading a jam session. We'd play a set before, and I don't know. I did get a lot of repertoire for my own band together. And so the people I hire are people I've been playing with for years, so they kind of know what to expect as far as tunes.
Oh, okay, okay.
So yeah, no, there's no rehearsal for Smalls or anything. It's kind of just they kind of know what tunes I like to play and have played them for years with me. But yeah, when I was leading my own band all the time, it was nice to try and figure out a sound, like what sort of music I actually like to play myself. It's challenging though because I kind of like to play all types of music, and so when you have the ability to really pick very specific tunes and put together a set list, it's sort of a challenge because you want to think about the audience too. Like, what are they going to think? Are these
Mm,
songs the same tempo? Or the
sure.
same key. That was another thing that I was really bad at because the drummer, like I'm not thinking about the keys of the songs.
Yeah, yeah, makes
And
sense.
my like somebody would be like, "Hey man, just so you know, like this kind of like two minor tunes in A flat, like back to back." I'm like, "Oh shit!" Like I didn't even know that. Like, I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So just I don't know. I guess that's sort of what that is.
Okay, okay, cool. Thanks. One other question here, and then I have just maybe a trivial question
Oh
to
boy.
land on before we wrap up. But what I'm curious now is somebody that's pretty young and you're still developing. Where are the holes in your playing that maybe, if you want to talk about it, is there anything you're still a little insecure about or try to shed a little bit more than other things?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of stuff, to be honest. I'm pretty hard on myself when it comes to where I kind of think my ability is at. And New York is a very hard place to be because everybody's so damn good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I go out and see drummers my age and they're just playing the craziest stuff. Just like they're just sound so killing. And yeah, a lot of times I see people play stuff that I'm just like I can't do that. I'm unable to do these things. And I think for me, a lot of the practice is like mental, kind of learning how to not beat myself up too much
Mm,
when I see someone my age playing really well and more take that as like inspiration and like a good thing. It's like, I'm
yeah.
really glad that there's other people my age who really love to do this and not take it so much as like, well, he's way better than me because there's so many layers. Like, I think my strengths as a drummer come in a more musical sense. I think I'm really good at playing with other people. I think I'm really good at supporting other people. And of course, I know I have a lot of ability and technical facility on the instrument as
Yeah.
well. And I'm not self conscious about that at all. That's just something that I work on every day so I can play the stuff that is in my head. But I think it really is kind of a mental thing, like not getting down on myself if I see somebody play some stuff that I can't do. Because there's a lot of that in New York, man. There's a lot of people playing a lot of drums, and it's really amazing. But yeah, just kind of understanding the layers, I guess, and knowing that I don't have to play all these crazy chops to work.
Yeah,
And
yeah, right. And everybody is different and unique, and there isn't one level to get to. But yeah, it's interesting. It's cool that you have that perspective. And the other thing I noticed on that recent Smalls gig is that you didn't solo a whole lot. It really was about playing music with the group and supporting the other musicians.
Yeah, I hate soloing, to be honest. I mean, I guess hate's a strong word, but I like solo. Like I have a lot of whatever. I have a lot of vocabulary, and I'm totally comfortable soloing. I mean, it just depends. Like if the band leader wants me to solo, I'll solo for fucking 40 minutes. That's fine. But I don't know. When it's my own band, I'm like, I'm not here to like show off necessarily my soloing vocabulary.
Right.
It's there, but I'd rather play music with these people who I hired. I don't like to solo so much on my own gigs, which might be like a unique thing for a drummer, but I'm not really sure.
So are you a fan of drum solos? Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of drum solos. I don't know. Sometimes when I'm playing drum solos, I get in my head a little bit, and that's something I'm working on, to stay really in the moment while playing. It's very vulnerable, man. I mean, drummers aren't used to playing alone, it's like we're always playing with a band. And there's something about a solo where it's like all eyes on me.
Oh, yeah. And it's loud and everything is exposed.
Everything's exposed. Yeah, exactly. It's very loud. And again, it's not like I think when I'm playing is bad because I've worked really hard and I know it sounds good. But it's like, I don't know. I think it's just the mental thing. Like, does anybody even want to hear a drum solo? Maybe they like the piano and now the piano's not playing. And now the drummer's playing alone. I don't know, man. It's just a tricky little thing that like musicians have to navigate. It's a very human thing. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of drum solos. Absolutely. I just don't always like to play them myself.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last question that I'm going to try to ask everybody going forward as sort of a way to wrap up the podcast.
Okay.
What album or couple of albums have you listened to the most in your life? And it doesn't have to be jazz. Are we talking Deftones here, or is there something else?
Definitely some of the Deftones albums. I think I really wore out. But wore out is the wrong term because that's not actually how it works anymore. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah, definitely some of the Deftones albums. Led Zeppelin was my favorite band. Growing up, John Bonham. I can't believe I never mentioned him until now. John Bonham was like my favorite drummer, maybe still is. And because he's basically like a jazz drummer in a rock band.
Yeah.
And so yeah, all those like Led Zeppelin self-titled albums, like those first 4 albums or whatever.
Are you hip to George Flutis?
Of course, man. Yeah, the best Bonham impersonator on planet Earth, man.
Man,
unbelievable. Yes. And also maybe one of the best, not maybe, definitely one of the best jazz drummers on earth as well.
Yeah.
Just incredible musician. Like I mentioned Billy Higgins. I've listened to the Cedar Walton trio volumes hundreds of times, the quartet volumes hundreds of times, or the quartet sets, set 1, set 2, set 3, I guess. Study in Brown, just because it was my first real like jazz album. I've listened to that hundreds of times. I mean, yeah, there's a few. My brain always goes to non-jazz albums when I think about this question because I've listened to such an insane amount of jazz music. It's hard to say what I've listened to the most of, but with other types of music, it's like Led Zeppelin, Deftones, Steely Dan, Stevie Wonder. Like I've really listened to those just so much.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. So, where's the best place for people to stay up with you and try to catch you when you're on tour or playing in New York?
Yeah, Instagram's probably the best, I guess. I mean, I do have a website that I don't keep updated enough, but it is there. But Instagram's definitely the best place, I think, which is, it is what it is. I guess we're in this age where you have to have Instagram and post on it. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll link to that and I'll link to your website and I'll put together some show notes here where can link out to some of the other stuff we talked about. But anyway, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited that we got to talk at this stage of your career. And I'll look forward to watching you develop and checking in with you again in the coming years.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Craig, man. It's an honor to be on the show. And looking forward to hearing more of your episodes with other guests.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And until next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Craig.
All right. Later. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe on your platform of choice and share it with a friend. You can find the show at practicingdrummer.com or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram as Practicing Drummer.